This is how you know if you can cook really good. Most of the time when I make Thanksgiving dinner, not all the time, but most of the time, or when I go to anybody's house for dinner, there's always turkey and dressing left the next day. And this is 2 days later, but this was actually the next morning. This was gone the same night, late, maybe, before midnight of Thanksgiving Day. So this pot was full to the top with a really huge bird, over 20 pounds. And as you can see from the sides, it was full of stuffing all the way around. And it was piled up to the top of the pan, the stuffing, as you can see. Okay? It was piled all the way up to the top of the pan. And before the next day, well, yeah, it's been 2 days. I was going to clean this pie yesterday. I just didn't have any energy, of course. It doesn't stink. Thank God it doesn't stink yet. I'm going to wash it now, clean all this mess up. This was a pot. This is what I had. Some squash in, some pumpkin, gone. Everything, potatoes, gone. Everything gone. Look at the bones. Look at down to the smallest bones, as you can see. All the way to the smallest bones. Bits and pieces of nothing but just bits and pieces of bones. See that little bone? That's when you put it in your mouth and the bone falls apart. Look at that. You see? And look at that. Even sucked out the marrow. You see that? The marrow, even the bone marrow's been sucked out of it. You see what I'm saying? Because that's how good it was. That's how you know that you're a good cook. You see that? All these little bones mean that it's when you put the big piece of meat in your mouth and you just spit out the really tiny bones after you suck the bone marrow juice out. So I got to clean up this mess from Thanksgiving. Look at that from the dinner. That's when you know you cook good. When my children were little, I used to, I'd say by the time my youngest was about 10. No, first time it happened, he was 8. And the middle child was 9.5, almost 10, or he was 10. And my daughter was maybe 12. So what happened was the first time that it happened, I had cooked. And when I didn't have any leftovers is what happened. And I cooked this big, the big round pot, I think it's called 5-quart, full of something. I know it took me all day to cook it because I do it in increments. Each step at a time, and it took me all day. It was really good. I know it was good because I just tasted it, of course, before I fed my kids with 1 little teaspoon just to make sure it would taste good. And then I was so exhausted, and I go and I sit down in my room, and I told the kids, I said, I'm gonna make you a plate in a minute, and then I go back in there and make them all a big plate. A dinner-sized plate. They were young, but I made them dinner-sized plates because since they were born, they could tear up some food. By the time they're like at least 1 year old, they start eating. They don't mess around. And I made them dinner-sized plates of what was in that 5-quart pot, and it was maybe half full. And maybe not 2/3 full. So your 3 plates took like 1/3 of the dinner. I go in my room, sit down for 15 minutes. Maybe I'm exaggerating. Maybe it was I'll say 25 minutes, just to exaggerate the time, but I'm pretty sure it wasn't 25 minutes long. So I get up and I go walk through to the kitchen to make me a plate. So I was okay. I rested for a few minutes, my feet. So I'm going here and make me something to eat. give me a plate. And I go in the kitchen and the pan was empty. There was nothing in that pan. That pan was empty, and all that was in that pan was whatever I could see on the edges of the pan. Whatever's on the edges of the pan. So I took my spoon and I started scraping the edges of the pan, and scraping it and scraping in the pan, and eating that. And it was delicious. It was so delicious. I had really outdone myself. And then I knew why the pan was empty. But I didn't get any of it. But maybe I say by the time I got done scraping the pan, I guess I got maybe 3 tablespoons. And basically, I guess if I didn't scrape that pan, those kids would have scraped that pan. Because it was good. And it was funny because when I went in there to get my plate and the pan was empty, their dinner plates were empty also. And that was their second helping because they had helped themselves. And, Mom, can we have some more? While I was still sitting down, I'm like, yeah, well, did you finish what you had? That was kind of quick, you ate it kind of fast. Mom, can we have some? Okay, fine. And I go in there, and their plates were empty, too. I'm thinking, okay, well, so maybe it was about 25 minutes. And they finished off that whole big pot. And that was the first time that this happened to me when I cook and I have no leftovers. The only thing that's in this pot is the back of the turkey. The spine, you can see. There's the spine, which means the back is laying there. I don't think the sides are there because I see the pan down there. So that means there's no meat on the sides left or the front or the top. Just the back, the spine part. Which is a good compliment. There's nothing worse than cooking a lot of food and having to store it. Making sure that you don't get sick of it before it goes bad. Everything doesn't taste good when you wrap it and put it in the freezer. When you take it out and warm it, everything doesn't taste good like that. Some things are only good when you just cook them fresh. And maybe 2 days later, if you cook something else the next day and then the next day and then on the third day you go back to finishing that off. But nothing's worse than if you can't finish it off and you have to figure out, well, if I store it in the fridge and that means if it's been in there for 3 days already, then I maybe have 2 more days, before it just starts to grow hair or mold, whatever. And just literally just go bad. Or like I said, you put it in the freezer and it's not good. It doesn't taste good when you take it out. Not to me. Some people don't mind eating food from the freezer. Personally, when you have a high immune system, you're not even supposed to eat anything that's already cooked from the freezer. That's number one, because the freezing process does something that irritates those white blood cells. So that's kind of out for me anyways. And so it's kind of good that I don't like the flavor of stuff when I take it out of the freezer. But it's very, very good that all that food got eaten. So now it looks like I have a big mess. But actually there's only 3 pots and 5 dishes. It just looks like a lot because it's a tall pot and a bowl under there. It's really not a lot. So anyhow, it's time for me to wash my dishes and get rid of all this mess from that good cooking I did. And I took my time cooking. Of course, I did like the grandmothers, and you don't sleep the night of that you're cooking, Thanksgiving dinner or whatever holiday dinner or whatever big dinner that is going to take a long time unless you have all this money to be the caterer. But we're not, to hire a caterer, but even we're not even talking about who's doing that. We're talking about who's cooking it. So even the caterers are, they're not just whipping it up really fast, because if they are, you could tell the difference in the flavors. Anything that takes a long time to cook tastes really, really good. Peace, love, and light.